Hey Ted, welcome to Bold Hearted. I am so excited. This is such an exciting Friday morning for me.
Fantastic. It's great to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a few weeks now. I first reached out to you, I think, a few months ago, and we finally scheduled it. So stoked to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've listened to a few of your podcasts. I really
Oh.
love the vibe and the guests you've had, and happy to be part of that.
You know what? Fun fact, you are my first male guest.
Wow, that's
I
quite the
know.
honor.
It is.
I got a lot of weight to bear here.
You got a lot. You're setting the stage for all the men to come after this. Okay, so I'm going to introduce your amazing credentials and your story very briefly to this audience. So, listeners, honestly, I am so excited to have Ted here. So, a little bit about Ted. Ted Fleming he's the founder of Partake Brewery. Okay. So he didn't just create Partake Brewing, he shattered expectations and carved out a new frontier in the non-alcoholic beer world. That's right, Partake Brewing is a non-alcoholic beer company, and Ted, right here in front of me, started it. In 2017, while the naysayers were busy doubting, Ted was busy redefining the game with a revolutionary, low-calorie, great-tasting brew that quickly ascended to the top of North America's non-alcoholic beer scene. Confronted with a Crohn's disease diagnosis, Ted didn't just face adversity, he transformed it into an unstoppable force, making Partake the ultimate companion for those who refuse to be held back. From art and music to sports and beyond, Partake is now the beer that lets you live fully and embrace every moment without compromise. And that's precisely why I had to have you on Bold Hearted, because your story is literally the personification of the brand. So excited for us to know more about how you got started with Partake, your story with leaving your corporate career behind, when you got confronted with Crohn's and any other diseases that you saw with yourself and your community. So, yeah, I would love to can you tell us a little bit about any other gaps that I've missed in your little bio?
Sure. Yeah, that was a great bio. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm Ted. I'm the founder of Partake Brewing, as you said, non-alcoholic craft beer company. A little bit more about me on a personal side. Yes, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. That was back in 2005. That's a huge part of the journey that I've been on and has influenced my entrepreneurial journey as well. I'll add that I'm a proud husband, father of three fantastic girls, ranging between the ages of 8 and 14 right now, and I'm an active athlete, and I love playing sports. I play squash, I play ice hockey, and I'm getting into pickleball a bit, which is a really fun sport that actually had the whole family out on the weekend playing. My parents, my kids, me and my wife. So really enjoying that as well.
Love that. I've been wanting to get into pickleball because I think I've heard it's a more accessible form of tennis. So you'll have to give me some pointers on that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
Because I've been playing tennis. I've not been that great. I've never had good lessons or proper lessons, but pickleball is on my list. So definitely want to hear more about that. I love hearing that you're a family man and you've kind of your family has gone along with you in your journey of starting Partake. Can you tell a little bit about how you came up with the idea of starting Partake Brewing?
Sure. So I'll take the story back to 2005. That was the year I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and I didn't really know what it meant. Like I had a few years of discovery as a male in my mid-20s who'd been a high performing athlete.
Yeah.
I took it a bit for granted, and I said, okay,
Right.
if I ignore it, I can just live my normal life and kind of power through it.
Okay.
And that was probably the opposite approach that was needed, and things kind of came to a head in 2010. I was hospitalized a few times in that year, and that was the same year I became a father for the first time. And those two events sort of came together, and remember I was in the hospital for one of those after one of those surgeries, and I had the time to reflect, and becoming a father just a few months before, I came to the realization, like, look, I can either continue on the path that I'm on with the same results, or I can make the changes that I need from a health and wellness perspective, and then obviously having more responsibilities, having become a father recently. So I made the decision to take that that other road and do the hard thing, which was to change. And a big component of that was my decision to give up alcohol. I knew drinking alcohol did create problems for me. It was undeniable, and so giving that up was a huge component of that health and wellness journey. And as I got into that journey, I realized how difficult it was for people who didn't drink. This was around 2010, and I'd go out to bars and restaurants with my friends. I still wanted to go out and socialize and have that social experience. I had been a craft beer drinker before I gave up alcohol, and craft beer was in this really fantastic and dynamic stage where there were new breweries popping up all the time and great new innovations on the product side and flavors and styles. And my friends were all able to experience that, and I would go out with them and I'd ask the server, okay, what do you have in the way of non-alc? And, I'd often be met with, soda,
Pepsi,
juice,
yeah,
milk.
Yeah.
I'd be basically given the kids menu
Yeah.
for beverages. And, at that time, if you were in a social situation that revolved around alcohol and you weren't drinking, you'd often get asked, "Hey, Ted, are you, what's wrong with you? Are you an alcoholic?"
It still does. I feel like this mentality is still there.
I think it is to some degree. It's much for me, it's much different, and I
Okay.
think it's
Yes.
much more inclusive. And I would say today, if you tell someone that you're not drinking or you're alcohol free or you're sober, it's met more often with sort of some envy, and it's viewed more aspirationally than it was back then. It was definitely
Yeah.
viewed in a negative light, and there was a stigma around not drinking. And so, I went through some fits and starts where I'd go, 4 or 6 months not drinking, and then, I remember one instance where I was out at a bar with my friends, and they said, "Hey, there's a round for the table," and I said, I'm not drinking. I still got a beer put in front of me.
Yes.
And, my willpower kind of ended there, and I drank the beer, and, I'd go through episodes like that and kind of regret it. And the realization for me was, hey, I need an alternative where I can feel very comfortable in the social situation. I have the same taste experience. So I started to experiment with non-alcoholic beer. And what I found was there wasn't great options.
No.
At the grocery and liquor store. You might find some old brands like O'Doul's and some of the store brands. They were all the same style. There was often dust on the product that was on the
Yeah.
shelf. It was past its best before date.
And they're in the corner somewhere, and you can't even find it, right?
Right. And then in a bar or restaurant scenario, they just wouldn't have anything. And I even was met one time with a server who said, like, why would you even order that? Like, what's the matter?
Oh my God.
Right. So it wasn't a very inclusive
Yeah.
environment for people who didn't drink. And so I started down the path with my own experimentation, and then I started doing some research about where can I get better non-alcoholic beers, and that sort of shifted my gaze to Europe, where some really well-regarded breweries, some that have gone, their history goes back to, the 11th century in Europe, they're making non-alc beer, and
No way.
and a whole bunch of other very reputable breweries in Europe are all making non-alc beer. And I started to discover that, hey, in Germany, 5% of all beer sold is non-alcoholic. In Spain, 10% of all beer sold is non-alcoholic.
Wow.
And then in North America, we were less than 0.5%. So it kind of brought the idea of, like, hey, maybe this is something that I can create a business around, while also sort of scratching my own itch of, hey, I'd love to have more variety and different styles. And so in 2013, I started the first non-alcoholic online store in North America. And the business model was pretty simple. I said, hey, I'll bring this product in, and if it doesn't sell, then I'll just drink it all, and that'll be
I'll
that,
drink it
right?
myself. I love it.
Right. And,
Almost a little bit self-serving, but it worked out.
Yeah. I had to share that inventory as
Of
it turned
course.
out. But a few days in, launched the website. A few days in, got our first order. I was living in Toronto at that time. I remember driving that order out to Kitchener-Waterloo to the first customer we had, which was pretty cool. And it built from there. And what I discovered was it was half about the product, but the other half was really about building community and creating that touch point with all these other people that had a similar journey, a similar story to me. And I remember, one person sending me a note saying, "Hey, Ted, thank you so much for what you're doing. My husband last week was diagnosed with cancer, and every Friday during the summer, he gets together with the same guys. He's been doing it for 20 years for barbecue and beers. And he had more anxiety about not being able to have beer at this thing with his friends than he did about the diagnosis. And I was able to find your store and get some product, and he was just so grateful to just feel like, hey, there's this turmoil going on in this other aspect of his life, but that social situation where he's having a beer and barbecue with his friends, that just felt normal to him because of the products that I was bringing to market. So there was a lot of stories like that were really motivating and really helped me understand that it was really about building community as much as it was about the product at that time. And then eventually those same consumers started giving me feedback. Ted, can you get craft non-alcoholic beer? As I said, so much growth in that industry and interesting flavors that weren't being produced by major producers.
Okay, so at that time it was still the online shop you were talking about. You hadn't started making your own beer yet.
Correct.
Got it.
The customers and the community came back to me and said, can you source this for us?
Yes.
And I went out to a lot of beer companies in Toronto, and I said, hey, I've got this great community, I've got this great sales channel, I really believe in this, will you work with me to create something? And I was basically had the door slammed in my face saying, it's not going to work, there's no market, good luck, don't quit your day job type of thing. And so that sort of pushed me in the direction of, hey, like I got to create something on my own, and went down that path of exploration and trial and error about brewing, and learned the brewing process, and connected with people that knew a lot more than me and were able to help me on that journey. And Partake was eventually launched on Kickstarter in the spring of 2017, and our first production batch went out to customers in September of 2017.
Love that. I love so many things here that I want to unpack a little bit. You said that, you realized it was not just about the product, it was about the community, right? And I think that you hit the nail on the head, 100%. About any business, right? It's not just about here's a product, here, buy it. I'm sure a lot of businesses do that, or maybe they've been successful that way, but you really listen to people. You're right. You really listen to what people wanted, what their needs were, what their desires were, and then you're like, okay, I'll give you that, right? And you had already built your audience, built your buyers, built everything, and then you made the product itself.
Yeah, and I had through my own journey empathy for that consumer. Yes. I led the business with, hey, there's a problem here, I want to solve it. The money piece is important because I need to justify the cost that I was incurring, but it wasn't the prime motivator for the business. Yeah. And as I pivoted the business and evolved it from the online store to Partake, the first product we developed was our IPA, and it's still one of our best sellers today. A fantastic non-alc version of IPA at just 10 calories. And I had one of my community members, one of my customers on the online store, sent me a message. He said, Ted, I hate IPA. I would never drink it. It's just it just doesn't appeal to me at all. But during the Kickstarter campaign, he says, I bought 10 cases regardless because I'm going to give them to my friends who like IPA, and I just want to support you because I know you'll eventually go on to brew styles that I like. And today we've brewed almost 20 styles of beer in obviously a non-alcoholic format. And that was just another one of those moments where it's like, yeah, I'm really doing something here. The community's giving back to me in terms of just them saying, hey, this is meaningful to us. We want to support you. You're the only one at that time, the only one really doing things for us in our community. And that was a motivator to help me keep going when, inevitably there are challenges in running a business.
You're funny that you talked about the IPA because I'm not an IPA girl either, right? I like craft beer, but I don't like IPAs because to me they're too bitter, they're too strong. There's right? I like wheat beers more, some sours. It's nothing that's too bitter, right? So anyway, I first actually had your beer, I think about a year and a half or almost 2 years ago. So I think something like that. I was thinking I'm going to do dry January. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do dry January. What are my options? So then I think I had gone to a grow. I wasn't even in Calgary. I think I was in Ottawa at the time. Anyway, I was in Ottawa, went to the store to find non-alcoholic options. There's not a lot of non-alcoholic wines, and even they're really bad, right? So then I went to non-alcoholic beers, and I saw Partake. I think there was a mixed variety pack. I'm like, yeah, sounds good. I'll buy it. So took it home, and I was like, not a lot of like, I'm not hopeful because so far I haven't had a lot of like really good non-alcoholic beers, etc. So anyway, I tried one. I'm like, this is really good. And then I saw the calories were like 20 calories or 10 calories. I'm like, no way. Okay, I'm gonna have another one of these. It was perfect, right? So it was. I loved the fact that it was low calorie. I loved the fact that it tasted really good, right? It tasted like a lighter version of just any beer, and that was fantastic. So to me, that was great. My husband also was trying to partake in dry January, and we both were like, "This is great." He's also not an IPA guy. He also tried the IPA, and he was like, "This is actually pretty good." I'm like, "Yeah, this is really good." So since then, this is like every time we want to do like any sort of non-alcoholic beers, this Partake has been our brand of choice for sure, easily.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I love hearing that.
No, it's honestly so great, and that's when when I got connected with you on LinkedIn, I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. And then I saw that you actually care about the people like who are drinking it. The people, I see that you take people's feedback when people are celebrating having one of your beers. You're actually like sharing and amplifying that message as well. So it really shows that you care about the community that you have built.
Yeah, and I think it's evolved from my story early on to it's like the story of our community.
That's right.
And we're bringing that to a much larger group today. Like our early customers looked a lot like me. They had a health or medical condition, religious reasons, addiction issues. It was rare that people were choosing to be in the non-alc category. They kind of had to be at that point. And today it's so much different, and maybe that contributes to why that social interaction is more positive and aspirational today. Is that today's consumer is choosing to be in non-alc largely because there's great products like Partake on the market, but also just a broader understanding of health and wellness and a drive towards that's bringing people into the non-alc category. I just want to touch on one more thing that that you brought up. The word partake.
Yes,
and
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's related to this to our community as well. That I was getting the feedback of like, okay, why are people into non-alc? Why are they choosing a non-alc beverage as opposed to an alcoholic beer in the case of our product? And we were getting so many different reasons, like health, religion. In our case, lower calories, just refreshment, clarity of mind, didn't want the hangover, all those types of things. But the common thread through all of them was, hey, I want to go to these social, I want to be social, I want to go to these events that are social. They largely revolve around alcohol, but I want to chart my own path.
Yes.
And I think Partake as a name captured like, hey, we still, even though we're drinking non-alc, you want to be part of that social connection that, alcohol plays a role in that. There's no doubt about it. But can you be part of that and socialize and have a good time and meet new people and do all those things without alcohol?
Yeah.
And we firmly believe the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think when what you said, for me at least, right, I'm not in that first category of market that you started it with. Like, I don't have those health concerns, anything. But for me, sometimes I choose, like, okay, no, I don't want to drink this week or this month or today or whatever, right? And before, for me, the choice wasn't there, right? There wasn't that much good options on the market. It just was not very tasty. I don't want to go to a bar with my friends and they're having wine and beer and I'm just like, I'll have a Coke. Like, no, right? Like, for me, it's so much about like, I want to have a tasty beverage. Like, that's all it is for me. I don't want to buzz. I don't want to feel something different. I don't want to like any of that, but I want to have a tasty beverage. I want something that tastes good, right? It's just like when you go to a restaurant, I want to have a great plate of food, a meal that tastes delicious. I want my drink to taste delicious too. I don't need all the, like, I'm not trying to feel a certain way. I don't need that, right? I'd rather not feel like, anything, any side effects. So I think the fact that you brought so many great options now and like tasty options that taste, I'm not gonna say taste just like beer, because that's almost like saying that, like, the vegan meat, they're like, oh, this tastes just like meat. Like, so what's the point of that?
Yeah, the way I look at it is it used to be a category that was around compromise. I have to compromise to have a non-alc beer. I'm making a compromise on taste. today you're not making a compromise
No.
on taste whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like for almost every consumer we talk to at trade shows and events, if we don't initiate the conversation with it's non-alcoholic, most people can't tell.
They won't even know.
It's
Yeah.
you know, the category, Partake being, you know, one of the leaders in that, has come up so much since the days when I started drinking non-alc beer.
I love it. I absolutely love that. I almost feel like you have almost single-handedly sort of changed the market a little bit. Is that fair to say?
I think in Canada
Yeah.
to a degree,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but you know, in North America more broadly, there's definitely other people and other companies that are helping with that. And right now, it's such a dynamic marketplace. There's new products launching
all the time.
launching every week, and it's really exciting times for a consumer. I would say it's probably the golden age of adult non-alcoholic beverages
it.
at this point. So, pretty dynamic market for non-alc consumers,
Yeah.
and we're happy to play a lead role in that.
What a time to be alive.
Indeed.
Speaking of fun and really great products that's being released, I see these two products right here in front of us. And these are your newest products, right? And they
They're-
sound delicious. Like, I'm just like, So one of them is, tell us about it.
Sure. So we have two products here. On your side, there's our peach goza. So, you know, I guess I maybe knew a little foresight that you like sour beers,
Oh,
not so bitter
yes.
beers.
Yes,
So
yes.
this is a
Perfect.
slightly sour beer with a hint of peach. It actually drinks a bit more like a seltzer than it does a beer. So whenever we have people
it.
come up to us and say, "Hey, I'm not really into beer," and we say, "Hey, try this," and you know, almost
guess it's
100%
like
of the time,
half juice.
people love it.
Right? It's kind of half juice. Like, almost feel like do you pronounce this goza?
Goza.
Okay, I thought it was ghost for the longest time. I'm so glad you corrected me.
It's okay.
I've had like other kind of goza type drinks from other beer companies in the last many years, and I really like it. I feel like it's half juice, half beer. So this is half juice, half non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, in this one we use natural peach flavoring, so not
Nice.
juice, so it does keep it lower in calories. If we
Okay.
use juice, it would be a little higher.
Yeah.
And then the one closer to me is our Oktoberfest beer, and we're recording this in October,
Yeah.
and Sober October is going on right now. So it's a seasonal beer for us. We make this for 2 or 3 months of the year, sort of between late August and end of October, and it's a fan favorite that we bring back at this time of year pretty much annually.
Is it like a what sort of beer is it? Is it like a
So it's a German style of beer,
Yeah.
a little bit darker, German malts and hops.
like
and
an amber beer type
Yeah,
thing?
it's more amber
Okay.
in color as well. Yeah,
So people who don't want to drink, they can also partake in Oktoberfest
absolutely.
with this beer. I love it. I'm just like really enjoying using the word partake in everything now. This is great. Great. No, I love that you have so many new things coming up as well, just like any other company, and they have like new additions for new products, new versions coming up. So I love these. Excited to try them one day. Okay, so let's go back to. I'm also curious. So on Bold Hearted, we talk a lot about trailblazers, right? People who've kind of like done the thing and gone down one path, and then then they've gotten a bit of a call from somewhere else, or they've realized, I want to try something new, and it's going to be hard. I'm going to have to blaze my own trail, which you clearly have been doing. Tell me a little bit about how Ted was, or who Ted was before he started Partake.
Sure. Yeah. So from a career perspective, I graduated in sort of the early 2000s. I had an engineering degree coming out of university, and went
Woo.
into the.
Sorry, I had to just say woo. Neither of us do engineering anymore, but
Okay.
go ahead.
Didn't know that. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, so went into my early career, was working in Toronto, was working in sort of the utilities business, water utilities, energy, renewable energy, and had a pretty good start to my career, and then around 2005, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, was starting to have low energy levels. I was having GI issues. I was wasn't treating it properly, and I
Yeah.
wasn't at that time in life where you think about, hey, the solution to this is taking some rest and looking after yourself.
Yeah.
I just had that
That's
athlete's
not it.
mentality of hey, we're gonna play through this. and eventually was
Yeah.
diagnosed with Crohn's, and
Yeah, yeah.
there's definitely some fear around that of like, what does it mean for me on a personal level? What does it mean for me
That's
from a
it.
family level?
That's it.
What's my identity?
I was gonna say that.
How does that affect my career? And so
Yeah.
I shifted a little bit into a more stable career path. I've been working for sort of private enterprise, and then shifted into sort of a government type job with a bit more security and a bit more
Slower pace.
and
Yeah.
some health benefits as well. And I did that for a few years, and I think one of the challenges I ran up to, and at least this was my perception, and I don't know if it was reality, but nonetheless, I felt like because I was taking time off work to have surgeries to recover, to manage my Crohn's disease, I felt like my career was going to stagnate. And I'd applied for a few promotions and hadn't got them. And at least in my mind, my health issues were part of that.
Okay.
And that frustrated me. And so, one of the jumping off point for me shifting to entrepreneurship was there was a program in Ontario to build renewable energy projects. I had expertise in that, and it would allow me, at least in my mind, some more flexibility to chart my own path, but also be able to take some time to look after myself when I needed. So first foray into entrepreneurship was actually buying an existing business, which was a self-storage business in Northern Ontario. I operated that for a couple of years with the intent of building a solar array on the rooftop. I did that, and that went into commercial operation in 2012, and then
Way to take it easy and take it slow and look after yourself, Ted.
yeah,
I love it.
I have a tendency, as do most most entrepreneurs, to
just
overcommit
Yep,
sometimes.
absolutely, totally get it.
But anyways, both those businesses worked out. I've since sold the storage business. I still own the solar power array. And then sort of at the tail end of that 2012, I was really starting to kind of really dig into that non-alcoholic beer side of things. And, I had some successes trying to get off alcohol, but again, I was in that period where I was going through some fits and starts with that. And that's when I discovered, hey, I really need something better. I discovered what was going on in Europe. I had finished these two basically, like, these two businesses were I'd stood them up, and they were kind of operating without a lot of work for me, and I discovered this business in the UK, which was an online store to sell non-alcoholic products. And at first, I tried to fill my cart and become a customer, and I got the message after I'd filled it with probably $500 worth of stuff that okay, yeah, we only ship in the UK, we don't ship across the ocean, which makes sense. And but I said, hey, maybe this is something I could do here.
That's right.
And then, one thing led to another, and I launched that store a few years later. So that's sort of a simplified version of my path. And ironically, the online store, I had this vision of it being kind of like passive income, wouldn't take a lot of work, but it took way more work than I thought, and then evolved into Partake, which was even more work. So
now it's your life.
In some ways, I failed as a passive income entrepreneur.
You failed to take it easy.
Yes.
Right? I love it. I love that. Like, so many entrepreneurs like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to like scale back. This is my way to scale back, and then they add on more and more and more, and it's just never scaling back. One thing you touched on, which is I always find so interesting from a mindset perspective, is the concept of identity. Right. So when you said that you were a high-performing athlete and you were, working on energy projects and engineer, right? So you were obviously doing a lot of things, right? And then the do you want to call it illness? Like, is that what?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. And the illness sort of came out of nowhere, I guess, right? And that must have really messed with your identity. Like, oh, I can't do all this stuff anymore. How'd you overcome that?
I wouldn't say I've necessarily overcome it. Just you learn to live with it.
Right.
And it's still a factor today. Like, I feel like, at least for my life, like every 10 years seems to be the start of a new chapter, the end of an old one, and the health journey has certainly been a big part of the last two chapters of my life, and I think it's a constant work in progress in terms of like, okay, what role does Crohn's disease play? I also have diabetes, unfortunately, and so like, how do those play into my own self narrative? They're important and they can be motivators, but there's also a tendency to use them as an excuse,
as a crutch,
and it's sometimes difficult but important to not play the victim with those things, and use them as, okay, things, to tell my story as by and large is a story of overcoming adversity, but there are definitely moments where you're down and you're struggling with it, and
you're human.
You're
human, and we all have those. But I'm safe to say I don't think you are using it as an excuse to not do anything. Like, I think you've clearly are establishing amazing things in the world, and you are helping so many people, like, just to feel like they can be part of any kind of society, any kind of group, any kind of gathering, social gathering that they want to have. So that's fantastic. I think the identity is so important. I almost felt like I had this image in my head that you're like driving a bus. Right? You're driving a bus, and the bus is your life, right? And there's these two passengers that are just always going to be there, right? You will have you can go wherever, but these two passengers are Crohn's disease and whatever else, right? They're just there. So you just have to drive the bus with it, and that's fine, right? It's not gonna deter you from going to wherever you're going. It's just a passenger on their bus, and they're just going to be there.
Yeah, and I've like more recently gone through sort of another transition where we've hired a CEO to run the day-to-day operations at Partake, and I'm transitioning into more, call it a founder role, doing things like this, podcasts and other media and advocacy. And I've joined the board of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of Canada. So using the platform I've created and the industry leadership that I've built to be an advocate for people who are having moving towards a healthier relationship with alcohol, for people with invisible conditions like Crohn's and diabetes to be perhaps a bit more graceful with themselves, a bit more open, to help organizations be aware of people who may be within their organization that struggle with some of those things. And as I work with other organizations, I do some mentorship with Platform Calgary here in Calgary, and I was really encouraged to see, like, in some of the hiring verbiage that they have, that they talk about people with visible disabilities, but also people with invisible disabilities as well. And I think that's a huge step forward, and they're showing some great leadership there. So just using my the opportunity I've been given through entrepreneurship to maybe extend the impact that I've already had and do some good for people.
Yeah, and honestly, I think there is so much invisible disability, disease, illness that so many of us live with, that you just by looking at us, we will have no ideas. And all kind of disability is not always visible, right? I once worked many years ago when I lived in Victoria. The owner of the company, I was a project manager for this construction company. One of the owners of the company had Crohn's, so sometimes he would just be gone for 2 days, right? And when he comes back to work and he's a go getter, get this done, we have to get that done, we need this client, we get that deal, go to that city department, all that stuff. But sometimes he would just be like gone for 2 days because he's just like something happened. So I fully understand. Well, I don't fully understand, absolutely not, but I've seen it, right? That he seemed like a totally like whatever guy, and then until it hits him, and then he's like, he's gone for 2 days. Also, speaking of invisible illnesses, I'm not sure if you have any sort of like exposure to any of that in your community or in your family at all, but also women has so many other, like women's health is also another topic that like no one talks about. There's so many invisible illnesses that come up for women that stops them from like performing well at work, from having a family, from just being like a level-headed person all the time. And honestly, for women too, I was actually just at a panel this week, which is why it's at top of mind for me. The research hasn't even been done around their illnesses. There's like endometriosis, PCOS, all that. There's advocacy is just starting, there's no research being done. I mean, there is research being done, but it's like women, we've been here since like the beginning of time. Like, how do we not know about, all these illnesses? So I'm glad that you're shedding light onto the ones that you are, that's in your sphere of influence.
Yeah. And it comes from a place of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Like you've gone through. I've gone through my own journey. I recognize that
Yes.
some people understand that and some people don't, and I think for me, like, one of the blessings of that challenge is developing greater empathy and having a
Yeah.
more open mind about the challenges people are going through that may or may not be visible.
How do you suggest people who've never been impacted by anything like that develop empathy?
That's a good question. It's a
Yeah.
hard,
It's a hard
it
question.
takes work. You can't just flip a switch and then
No.
be empathetic. I think it has to come from real experience,
Yeah.
and often the experience is recognition that you weren't empathetic in a situation where maybe you should have been, and so I think some of the impetus is on people like me to do what I'm doing today, talk about it, bring it out into the open, make people just aware of, like, this is, when you're working with an employee who, may not be performing or maybe away more, it's not by choice. It's not because they're lazy or
They're
they don't
slacking
care.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, it could well be because they're dealing with something that
For
you just
sure.
don't know about, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Mental health is another thing like that too, right? Especially in the corporate world, there's so many mental health challenges because you're trying to keep up with the rat race. You're trying to like meet goals. You're trying to do this. You're trying to manage your life. If you have a health condition, even forget it, right? I've worked in places like that too, where I've had people team members have disappeared suddenly, and like, where did he go, right? And like HR people are calling me like, where's your direct report? I can't find him. He's gone for a week. And I was like, okay, what's happening? Turns out there was mental health challenges that he was dealing with, right? So empathy goes a long way, especially I think even if you haven't dealt with it yourself, but I think even just keep an open mind. I think, like you said, knowing that you did not recognize it the first time, and then learning.
Yeah, like for mental health, it's particularly a problem with entrepreneurs because we often feel like we can't take a day off, right? If we take a day off, this isn't going to happen, that isn't going to happen, and so that exacerbates the pressure and probably exacerbates the stress. I've probably had 3 periods of burnout in my entrepreneurial career, which are tough, and you get better at recognizing them, and you get a better, you build a better toolkit to deal with them. But it's a real problem out there. One analogy I like to use from a mental health perspective is, in sports, like today you have, like, if someone is concussed in an NFL or CFL game, there's concussion protocol, and then they're out for a few days, and then they're really looked after, and it's mandated. And I think that's very different than what it was 20 years ago when, similar to what I said about, powering through. It's like the mentality was like, oh, good for him. Like, he got concussed, but he came back for the 3rd period and played. Like, what a champ, right? And, that change in, hey, it's not only okay, but it's like encouraged to like look after yourself first. Like, this is
Absolutely.
you as the player and you as the individual are of paramount importance. The team can do it without you.
Yeah.
So you can look after yourself. And I think if we brought that same mentality to entrepreneurship, I think we would have less people suffering with burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like giving yourself that little bit of grace. Like, it's okay. Like, we'll all be fine, right? Like, that it's because entrepreneurs, athletes, they're so hard on themselves. Their expectations and the standards are so high for themselves that you just feel like, if I'm not meeting these expectations I have set for myself, I'm letting everyone down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the mindset, and that's probably why you see a lot of athletes become entrepreneurs, because it's the mindset that it often takes. But that has its downsides as well.
For sure. But when it comes to entrepreneurs or high performing people, some of us, we just want to blaze our own trails regardless, and we just have to be like, just take all that into consideration, right? Like, how do we balance our well-being, our mental health, or any other challenge that we have, while also wanting to do all the things that we want to do in the world. So all the people that are listening to this podcast, right, they're typically trailblazers, or they want to blaze their own trail. What advice do you have for people who are now at that point in their life and they're like, hey, what's next for me? I'm feeling the itch to do something else, something different, something perhaps bigger. What advice do you have for them?
Sure. Yeah, like for me, impact has been a great North Star for me of like,
Yes.
okay, how can I help people? And, being an engineer, I kind of have a lens of like, what's a real problem that can be solved, and how does that help people? And it's not about, addressable market being in the hundreds of billions of dollars. It's like, start with something that's really a problem that needs to be solved and is really meaningful to some people, and build a business from there. And if you're it helps sometimes if it's your own struggle, because
Yeah.
it gives you that drive to fix it.
Absolutely.
And that was part of my story. But solving problems that really help people and having that positive impact have always been sort of that guiding light, North Star that has helped me.
And that's what you advise people who are also sort of wanting to do something. It's like, what is it that you struggle with? Use that as North Star.
That's helpful,
Impact.
but it could be something like maybe a family member struggles with it,
Yeah.
or like even you've come up through the corporate world, and you have customers who have these problems, but
Yeah.
No one else is willing to solve it. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't
Be close
have
to the problem.
Doesn't have to be super personal, but
For
it has
sure.
to be like, hey, this is something that someone would value if I solved,
Yeah.
and likely would pay for and be able to make a business out of. So that's from an entrepreneurial perspective. You could also approach it from a nonprofit or charitable organization perspective as well. But ultimately, it's about having an impact, a positive impact on other people, and solving problems.
Love it. Second to last question I have for you. We'll start wrapping up. I ask this question to all the guests that are on this podcast. The name of the podcast is Bold Hearted. So what does bold hearted mean to you?
Yeah, I think it ties into that last answer of
Yeah.
like, it means pursuing impact, pursuing positive change in the world. And again, it doesn't have to be economically driven, but truly solving problems and helping other people, I think is really motivational. And for me, at least in my experience, it's helped having that drive and that purpose, and that knowing, those stories I told you earlier on about people saying, telling me like, this is the impact you're having on my life. And it could just be one story, but it's so motivating, particularly in those difficult times
Yes.
that always come up as an entrepreneur, like tens or hundreds of issues.
Am I doing the right thing?
Right.
Is this worth my time? Am I wasting my time? Right?
Yeah, and it keeps you motivated
Yeah.
through those more difficult periods. And it's like, okay, why am I doing this? Oh, I remember why. I'm doing this for this customer because it's important to them and it makes a difference in their life. I'm not
Yeah.
just doing it for a paycheck. And that's been a really important aspect of what I've done over the last 10 or 20 years.
I love that. Love that so much. Coming from a place of empathy, impact, how can I help people? They need, like, look at this. What I'm doing is worth it because these people have told me so. This is the difference it's making. Having that as North Star is so key. Thank you so much. That makes so much sense. Final question. If anyone listening here wants to try one of your delicious beers, which I will say they are delicious, where can they find them? Because people are all across Canada listening, number one. There are some people in the States listening. There's some people all across the world listening too, but maybe they have to wait for later on.
Okay.
But tell me.
Yes, so we through our website, drinkpartake.com, we ship across North America.
Great.
Hawaii and Alaska as well.
Okay.
So you can get all of our products through there, even our seasonal products like our Oktoberfest. In Canada, big retailers, Loblaws, Superstores, Sobeys Safeway, Metro, Whole Foods, Walmart, great retail partners. We've done some Costco work as well. So we're widely distributed in Canada. In the U.S., we're not in all 50 states. We're in about 24, but Whole Foods, Wegmans, Target, Walmart are all big partners for us as well. Total Wine & More is a great partner as well. So just a snippet of some of the retail partners we have across North America.
And outside North America?
We don't ship across outside of North America yet.
In the plans.
But yeah, I do get pictures from Europe sometimes of people who've come to Canada
There you go.
and brought back Partake
Love it.
to where they live in Europe or Asia. So it's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ted. This was such a fun conversation and just also so insightful to know what has motivated you to start a company like this. And it's not just about profits and, oh, let's just find a place in the market. There's such a big market opportunity. It's not just that, driven by that. It's literally driven and started by empathy, the need, the want, desire to make a difference, to build community. And I think all of those are really, really respectable. So thank you for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.